Great. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Luke Simcoe, the communications lead here at Code for Canada. I'm going to bring Dorothy and Leah on in just a moment, but I wanted to welcome you all here today and thank you for your interest both in Code for Canada and our fellowship program. This is a bit of a special online open house in that we're going to focus on the fellowship program today, particularly the experience of the program from the perspective of government hosts. So Dorothy and Leah are going to talk to you at length about that. And I also wanted to remind everyone that there will be a Q&A at the end of the presentation, and you're free to type any questions that you have into the live chat on the YouTube channel, and Dorothy and Leah will get to them at the end. So thanks again for your participation today, and I'm going to turn it over to Leah and Dorothy.
Hello, everyone. Hi. I'm Leah Melito. I'm the Fellowship Program Manager at Code for Canada.
And I'm Dorothy, and I'm our Director of Partnership.
And we'll be talking to you today about how the fellowship works, the sorts of impacts that can happen from the fellowship, and how you can get involved. But first, I'm assuming if you're here, you're somewhat familiar with what Code for Canada as an organization is. But just in case you're not, I'll give you a very high-level look at what we do. So Code for Canada connects government innovators with the tech and design community to improve life for Canadians. That's the high level look at what we do. And we do that through 3 different program areas. Our largest program area is the fellowship program, which is what we will be talking about today. So I won't go too far into that right now. We do also have 2 other programs that I'll just give you a very high level look at so you can have a sense of where the fellowship program fits into our larger scheme of things. We have a community network, which is aimed at supporting the creation and growth of civic tech community groups across the country. So we leaders in communities across the country to build roots civic tech communities locally. And finally, we also have an education and training program, which offers training and workshops for both communities and governments in order for them to learn how to work together, learn how to use the methods and tools of civic tech and digital government to learn together and build public interest technology. So for example, we recently finished teaching a course at Ryerson University's continuing ed course called government, and it was designed for public servants. So we do education and training programs as well. But the focus of today's workshop will be the fellowship. So I will tell you a little bit about the fellowship. And as I mentioned, Dorothy will talk about the sorts of impacts that governments can expect to see from the fellowship. So the fellowship, we're right in the middle of our first cohort here in Canada. But I want to emphasize that though this fellowship program is new here in Canada, models from around the world. Canada's fellowship enables technology and design professionals to work shoulder to shoulder with teams to help them build public services. And this is a model that has been elsewhere around the world. You can see some of the other partners of Code for All. Code for All is an international network of organizations like ours around the world, and many have fellowship programs just like ours. So Code for America, Code for Pakistan, Australia, these all have fellowship programs that the Code for Canada model is based on, and these are just a small sampling of organizations around the world that do this kind of work. So, you know, we're really lucky to be able to, and I feel grateful to be able to be building this program off the lessons learned in some of those organizations and to be able to leapfrog, if you will, based on some of the knowledge that we've gained from our colleagues around the world doing this kind of work. So fundamentally, the fellowship program is about 4 things. You know, first, recruiting a team of fellows, partner, the actual fellowship placement itself, and then the impacts that you can see from the fellowship program. So I will dig in a little bit deeper into each of these things, starting with recruitment. So when we recruit a team of fellows, a team of fellows consists of a developer, a designer, and a product manager. And we're looking to find mid-career professionals. So they're not people who are just coming out of school. They're people who have some experience in the field. Importantly, we're looking for people who are excited, who not just have these great skills, but are also really excited to bring them to bear on a public interest challenges. So this year, we recruited a team of fellows starting in June. We opened a national call for applications, and we conducted both technical and interpersonal assessments with the applicants. And that was really important because, you know, the fellows we're certainly recruiting people who are very technically skilled and proficient, but we're also looking for people who can be agents of change and help their government partners learn with their government partners. So we're looking for people who have sort of those interpersonal skills as well in terms of communication and coalition building, and are really great at communicating about how they work. And so we had an open call for nominations, and we also do those technical and personal assessments, interpersonal assessments. We worked with a selection panel of senior technologists and designers across the country who worked with us as our jury to help select our first cohort of fellows. And so this year, we're really pleased with the way that our recruitment process worked. We wound up with over 300 applicants for 6 positions, which I always like to draw this comparison because I'm quite proud of it, that in the States, Code for America, when they were recruiting for about 16 positions, they had just over 500 applications. For over twice as many positions, and from a country that's 10 times the size of Canada. So, you know, when I think about what that shows about the tech community in Canada, it really shows that we are really interested in using, or the tech community in Canada is really excited about this opportunity, and there's a lot of appetite in Canada for using their skills to support the public sector. So you can see there on your screen, we had over 300 applications for just 6 positions. And the other thing that we're really proud of is that by the final stage of hiring, the candidates were 50% women, 2/3 were people of color, and 10% were coming from outside of Canada. So lots of people really saw this as an opportunity to bring their skills back home to Canada, and were looking for an opportunity to use their skills for the public good. Something that applicants told us was that, you know, many applicants told us that they were looking for an opportunity like this and had been, you know, working in jobs where they get to use their skills, but were really looking for an opportunity to put them, to have an impact for the public good. And so this presented an opportunity to do that. And so if you know anything about the problems that are often in the news about pipeline diversity and inclusion in pipelines for the tech sector, not just in Canada, but really worldwide, we're really proud that we had a recruitment process that was able to be inclusive and diverse and build a group of fellows who looked like Canada. And that's something that was really important to us as we were going through the recruitment process. Something that I think is worth noting too is that our not only that our application process and our recruitment process was more rigorous that they have experienced in the past, but also that it was a more enjoyable and a better experience than many recruitment processes that they've been through in the past. So if we go to the next slide, there's actually a quote from one of our applicants who told us that the interviews were actually something that she looked forward to over the summer. As all of us who have been through recruitment and hiring processes know, that that's pretty rare, and we're really proud to have built a recruitment process that was inclusive and diverse, but also was a good experience for folks. And we're really happy to hear that feedback. So from those over 300 applicants that we got, go to the next slide, you can see some of the firms and the experience that our applicants had. Large corporations across Canada, international corporations, also very recognizable names where our applicants came from. We selected a team of 6 fellows that we're really excited to be working with now. So we have 2 teams of 3 fellows, 1 team of 3 fellows working with the province of Ontario, and 1 team of 3 fellows working with the federal government. And we have their photos on the next slide. I'll tell you a bit about them, but there's a whole blog post that we have introducing you to all of them. So if you're really curious about who our current fellows are, I encourage you to find that blog post on our Medium blog. Christine, Santiago, and Sophie are working with the province of Ontario, and Dan, Leon, and Raluca are working with the federal government. And they have, you know, I should have this number, but I don't know off the top of my head that they bring, but years of experience in full interdisciplinary backgrounds. We have encouraged you to check out. I can share with some. So that's a bit about how we do recruit. Of course, that part and we look for and it looks like. The sides that we're looking for in a government partner. First, we're looking for a partner that has a project that's well supported by government staff, including leadership and support services. And that's really important, you know, for the obvious reasons. We want fellows to be working with people who are excited to be working with them, but also because, you know, the fellowship is a relatively short-term thing, and we want to be able to be putting fellows in a position where they can make an impact fast. And part of that is making sure that they're working with teams who support them and are going to enable them to get to fast. Another thing that we look for is teams and projects that are aligned with our approach to software development. So I'll talk a little bit more about what that means in detail later, but in short, that means looking for teams who are excited to be doing user research, who are excited to go right to residents who are going to be using the product that fellows build. So teams who are excited to be doing that, but also teams who have framed their project as a challenge and not as a predefined solution. I'll talk a bit more about that later as well. But that's important because fellows, part of the skills that fellows bring is doing that user research and using that user research to define what a solution needs to look like. So we're looking for projects that are framed challenges and not pre-scoped solutions. And if you're interested in hosting a team of fellows, we can certainly talk you through that, but that's something to keep in mind. And the final thing that we're looking for in a great partner and a great project is something that is able to show what's possible. So that means a team that is ready to work in the open and excited to show the process. And also it often means a challenge that is relatively public facing and likely to impact lots of people. Because the fellowship program is not just about creating great digital services, but also about showing what's possible, this is really important. That we work in the open and that we're looking for projects that can be kind of demonstration cases for other agencies and departments throughout government who are interested in working in a more digital way. So if we can go to the next slide, I already mentioned this a little bit, but we have 2 government partners right now that our fellows are working with. One team of fellows is working with the province of Ontario and specifically with the Ministry of Advanced Education and Skills Development. And the province of Ontario is also one of our founding partners, and so they really made and the other team of fellows that we're working with right now are working with the Government of Canada, and they're working with the newly formed Canadian Digital Service that you may have heard about, and are right now working on a project to help get veterans access to that they're eligible for. So we're really excited to have these two partners, and that both the province of Ontario and the government of Canada are kind of leading the way internally throughout governments in Canada to help make digital government transformation possible. So finally, I've talked about how we do recruitment and how we find a government partner, but realistically, that's all work that happens before the 10 months of the fellowship itself begins. So now I'll tell you a little bit about what those 10 months themselves look like. So if we can go to the next slide, it will show the kind of the general timeline of a fellowship. So fundamentally, the fellowship includes an onboarding month, which I'll talk about, user research and prototyping phase, a larger phase where fellows are building, testing, and revising, and then finally, ability. So I will dive into each of those stages and tell you a little bit more about what they look like, starting with onboarding. I'll tell you a bit about what happens during onboarding. We just finished the month of onboarding fellows. And really what we're looking for to accomplish during onboarding are a few things. Looking to build trust and understanding between hosts and fellows. It's really important that because fellows are working with government partners in a way that might be different from the way that our government partners have in the past, it's important that there be a trust and knowledge exchange in both directions, right? Because our government partners will be learning from fellows, but equally our fellows will be learning from government partners. So we really want to build our onboarding phase to enable that growth of trust and empathy and understanding between both hosts and fellows. That we're looking for is an opportunity to enable both hosts and fellows to be advocates for new digital methods and tools. And that means giving everybody to talk about why fellows work in the way that they do, and also talking about the benefits of working in that way. And finally, preparing everyone to deliver great digital products. So that means getting the fellows the information about subject matter that they need, and getting our government hosts a good understanding of how the fellows will be working and how they'll be working well together. So unlike many other onboarding and training processes that you may have been through when you started a new job, the fellowship onboarding is actually quite long. We have our fellows together with us for 4 weeks, and our government hosts join us for the last week of that onboarding. And that's really to enable the fellows to have a lot of time to learn about this new environment that they'll be working in. You know, fellows bring expertise in the private sector and building digital tools in the private sector, but we want to really make sure that they're well prepared to translate that experience that they have to the public sector. So we want to make sure that we provide them with a lot of setup to do that really well. And having our government partners with us for that last week is a really important piece to enable, of course, that trust and learning between government fellows and hosts. And so, you know, some of the things that we did this year to enable that are bringing in experts from other places around the world that have done projects like this. So if we go to some of the next slides, you'll see some of those people that we brought in. We brought in David Eves, who is in the picture on the next slide. Excuse me, who has done quite a bit of work from Code for America. With Code for America, excuse me, and he worked with the fellows for an afternoon. The next slide, you'll see Dan Hahn, who launched the California's first digital service, who spent a day with fellows. And on the next slide, you'll see the fellows meeting with the outgoing Code for America fellows. So they had a video conference with the outgoing Code for America fellows, which is a nice way to sort of have our new fellows learn from the Code for America fellows who have been through a project like this. So it was really important to us that we connect fellows and our government partners with those experts who have been through this before, But it was also really important that we build a lot of hands-on time for both of our fellows and our government partners. So we had the fellows work together on a challenge that was presented by their government partners, and they sprinted and worked very intensely for a few days on that challenge and presented the outputs of their work to their government partners during onboarding. And so we built onboarding to be hands-on and to give everybody access to experts who have gone through this sort of work before, so that they would be really well prepared to do the work that they needed to do as part of the fellowship. So we just finished that onboarding phase a couple weeks ago, and fellows are right now at the very beginning of their actual embedded period inside of government. So I'll ask Luke to go to the next slide and talk a little bit about what happens during that embedded period. So during the first couple months when fellows are inside government, excuse me, they'll be focusing primarily on user research and prototyping. And this is really important. Fellows will be speaking directly with people who will be using the service that they build. So that might be residents, but it also equally likely will be in staff inside government, because we know that whatever fellows will build, it'll be used by not just folks outside of government, but also likely folks inside of government as well. And you know, that user research will look like a few things. It might look like interviews with people. It might look like shadowing people while they go through using a service that government provides. And it really provides fellows to have an understanding of the challenge that's grounded in the real experiences of residents and the frontline staff who are dealing with the challenge every day. And during that user research phase, they might challenge some assumptions that are held about the challenge that they're working on. And during those 2 months, that's the time where they'll tease those things out, and by the end of those 2 months, have some insights to present to their hosts, and will have a scoped solution that they will plan to build during the next phase. So during that next phase of the project, which is really the largest period of time where fellows are on the ground, and I'll ask Luke to go to the next slide, please. That's when they're building a solution in an iterative way. So they will, based on what they learned during user research, they'll build a prototype. They'll test that prototype with real users, and then based on what they learn, they'll repeat, and they'll either build more based on, they'll continue to build based on the assumptions that they made, or they might learn that an assumption that they made or something that they learned from user research needed some tinkering, and they might revise and change their assumption. And so the objective of working in this agile way is to learn fast and pivot quickly. So instead of waiting to the end of the build phase to learn if something works or doesn't work and to test it, fellows are testing all the way along and revising based on what they've learned during the test phase. Last phase of the fellowship, fellows will move to thinking about transition and sustainability of their product. So if we can move forward a slide. Fellows won't be there for forever. The fellowship is an intentionally bounded project, and so during that those last couple months of the fellowship is when fellows are working really intensely with their hosts, whether it be the subject matter experts or folks in IT, to make sure that the solution that they build is supported inside government, and that the learnings that they had during the project are left behind, so that their impacts can live on long after them. So that's about making sure that the project really lasts. So that's a bit about how the fellowship itself works. If you have any questions about any details about those phases, I'm happy to talk more about them. But before we get to questions, I'm going to toss it over to Dorothy for a few minutes to talk about the benefits of the fellowship program and how you can get involved if it's something that's interesting to you.
Great, thanks, Leah. So yeah, essentially, from the 10 months of our government partners working with a team of fellows, really we see a combination of outputs and outcomes that come from the program, and we kind of categorize it into three main things. And one of them is an actual digital product or service that gets delivered to our government partners that helps your teams to better deliver on your mandates. And then part of the, there's also deeper kind of values or deeper kind of offerings that the fellowship provides to government teams, in that it helps to build digital capacity and eventually catalyze culture change. So this first one of delivering something impactful, Luke, if you go to the next slide, there's, as Leah mentioned, there's, we've looked to other fellowship programs around the world as presidents in terms of what fellows, the kind of work that fellows have done and the kind of projects they've done with other government partners in their local jurisdictions. In Canada, again, like Leah said, this is our pilot year, so we have nothing to point to yet in terms of what the outputs look like. But I wanted to highlight, three nice stories. One is, the first one on the left side is a product called Get Cal Fresh, which is an online application that was developed by a team of Code for America fellows that were working with the state of California's Child and Welfare Services department. And essentially, this tool helps Californians to access healthy food through the state's food stamp program. And so what the Code for America fellows ended up doing is they actually redesigned this very lengthy application process that took over an hour to an hour and a half to complete, with like 50 web forms on a computer. There was a lot of barriers to participating in the program just because the process to sign up was so cumbersome cumbersome. And so the Code for America fellows redesigned this process, and through creating this portal, Get Cal Fresh, which made the time it took for applicants to sign up for food stamps from an hour to an hour and a half all the way down to about 10 minutes. So part of that, what that looked like in terms of a digital output is it was a mobile friendly website, as you can see in this picture, because they knew Code for America, as well as staff that they were working with in government, through user research, discovered that many clients who were eligible for food stamps had access to a mobile phone where they could sign up for food stamps. So this is one of the projects that came out of Code for America. Victoria Legal Aid was a project that the Code for Australia fellows worked on. Victoria Legal Aid basically provides legal assistance to over 200,000 Australians every year. And their demand for services is constantly growing. And the primary way that residents gain access to legal services and understand, navigate their services is by calling someone. So they call a hotline, and staff were Victoria Legal Aid staff were overburdened with long wait lists of people calling, requesting just more information. And so Code for Australia fellows created an online triaging app, which helped residents to find the legal assistance that they needed. And on the back end, it saved a lot of agency time and resources of staff, which they calculated ended up being around 30 hours per week of staff time. And then the last example I want to talk about is an app that's actually a mobile game that was developed by a team of Code for Mexico City fellows, where essentially players would score points by collecting data about the city's complex and chaotic public transit system. So essentially the work that was done by the fellows in creating this mobile app, as well as the players who actually played the game and collected all this data, resulted in the first ever map of Mexico City's bus routes. So here are three examples of different fellowship teams in different jurisdictions that applied the same 21st century digital processes and tools that Leah was mentioning in terms of agile development and doing user-centered design, and applied it to three very different government challenges, and created, again, three very different outputs, all the way from mobile apps to like crowdsource mobile games. So Yeah, so that was just to show that the output, it can be very different in terms of what that tangibly looks like for government hosts, but the impact is always high, and it's always very resident facing. So which brings me to the next output of the outcome of the fellowship program. In that, so Luke, on the next slide, in that Leah, really made it quite clear that throughout the 10 months that fellows work with our government partners, the fellows work very collaboratively. So they work shoulder to shoulder with your staff on these targeted challenges. And so what happens throughout the 10 months is that your staff end up adopting a lot of these new ways of working that the fellows bring into the government context. So, things like, doing user research, creating a prototype or a minimum viable product, testing that product with your users, taking that feedback and then iterating on that to continue to develop a product or a service iteratively. These are all things that the fellows bring our host teams along for that ride, so that there's this really inherent learning by doing approach that comes out of it. So and again, that's all of that, those 9 months of kind of the hands-on working comes after, as Leah mentioned, that 1 month of kind of intense onboarding training for our fellows, which is kind of like a how government works boot camp. Whereas also there's that 1 week of training within that 1 month for our government hosts as well, needing to build rapport with the fellows, so that come day of being embedded together, both fellows and government hosts can hit the ground running. Throughout the 10 months, I'm not sure if Leah mentioned it, but we do provide ongoing project support. So, regular check-ins on a monthly basis, just to make sure everything's going on track and that all parties are happy with the work that's being done. On the next slide, there's a quote that I've pulled from Mark Holland, who is the mayor of Kansas City. He was a Code for America fellowship host. And I really like this quote because it really summarizes this learning kind of value proposition that comes from the fellowship. In that, a lot of the fellowship is about unleashing the innovative capacity in your team, and so by giving your team and your staff the ability to learn these new ways of working and actually apply them in a very tangible project that with a targeted outcome, which is a digital product or service, really allows government teams to inherit these new ways of working in a really wholesome way. And so this brings me to the last kind of outcome of the fellowship, which is that when you have these digital outputs that are where your team is able to show what's possible when you apply these new ways of working to government problems, along with this kind of built up internal digital capacity within your team to culture change. If you go to the next slide, Luke, there's we at Code for Canada, we know that adopting new ways of working and making the case for these new capabilities and roles within your organization, so that beyond the fellowship program, you can hire a user experience designer because you've just piloted it and have realized, hey, we could really use one, as a permanent kind of role. So it helps to make a case for new teams, new team structures, new roles. And so because of that, on the next slide, Luke, we really see the fellowship as a mature model for digital transformation. As Leah mentioned, there's fellowships around the world, and so we've had we're really lucky to be able to look to other fellowships in terms of what they've learned through the years that they've iterated their programs and apply that to the Canadian context. Great. So that's kind of the outputs of the fellowship program, I'm going to shift over now to what's coming up next for us at Code for Canada and the fellowship. And essentially that's talking about the cost and the cohort timeline. So we've been talking about our pilot year of the fellowship, that's 2017, which is just about to wrap up. And we're now looking towards 2018 to ramp up the fellowship program. Essentially it's going to work. So for next year, we're looking for more government partners to bring on who are interested in hosting a team of fellows. And so I'll kind of break down what that looks like in terms of timeline. But before we do that, I'll cover the breakdown of the cost of the fellowship program. So Luke, on the next slide, you'll see the cost of the program. So all fellows are compensated a salary of $75,000 per year, and that's prorated to 10 months. So, while this is less than what they'd earn in the private sector working in a tech company, fellows really see the fellowship program as being an opportunity where they can, work on something that's really meaningful with impact, and so they're willing to and interested in taking a bit of that pay cut to be able to work on something that they really care about, which is really great. And so that really takes up the largest portion of the program fee for the fellowship program. The next largest chunk comes from onboarding. So we take that as Leah, our last onboarding month. Our current cohort of fellows, we take onboarding and training very seriously. That because we've learned from we've gotten those learnings from other Code for fellowship programs around the world. Specifically at Code for America, who has one of the oldest fellowship programs, and they've been doing this for a while. I think it's like 6 or 7 years now. Originally, they would take people from the tech community and plop them in government, and say, okay, go, and what they would have a bit of a hard time like getting their projects off the ground. So Code for America started doing onboarding training to really prepare the fellows in this this kind of like boot camp style of how government works, in order to like prime them and prep them for what to expect. So that's why we spend good chunk of the 10 months doing onboarding, because we know that will really set up the fellows for success for the remaining 9 months, as well as our government partners, because we do include our government host teams in that training as well. And the remaining bucket of the program fee really goes to Code for Canada staff doing the recruiting. So Leah spoke of some of the caliber of talent that we got who applied to the fellowship program for this first cohort, and a lot of that was due to like our quite intense and rigorous recruiting process. That includes making that open call to the public, is pushing the fellowship program through all of the required social media channels, and bringing it to the attention of the tech community in Canada. As well as making, Leah spoke of some of the technical interviews and tests that were required in order for fellows that fellows had to go through, and that was a huge task. So we really pride ourselves on the kind of talent that we can attract. We're in a really lucky position to be able to attract that talent, and so we do spend a significant amount of time and resources making sure that we're assessing the people in the right way, and making sure they're having a good experience along that way. So this brings me to the timeline. I mentioned that in 2018 we're looking for we're running 2 cohorts of fellows. So this year, in our pilot year 2017, we've had 1 cohort, and that the cohort is broken down into 2 teams of fellows. So that's six fellows in total, or 2 government partners. For 2018, we're going to have, again, 2 government partners per cohort. So it'll be the same kind of six fellows in a spring cohort, as well as a fall cohort. If you look at the sample timeline at the bottom of that slide. If we start if we start working together with our government partners at this point, we're going to look to start recruitment for our next cohort of fellows early next year, and then look towards a May, June start date for our next set of government partners. So if this is something, if you're in government and this is something that interests you, or you think, maybe your leadership would be really interested in this program, feel free to reach out to me. My contact, as well as Leah's contact, is at the end of this presentation. But do send us a note, and we're happy to come and meet with you and figure out if the fellowship is right for you, and if so, like what that timing would look like and what the project could look like as well. So that's about it for me. There's a few things that we just want to wrap up with. One is that if you're really interested in this, you should follow the work of the fellows, because it is like we've been saying, it is our pilot year, and so we're all very excited about what the fellows will be doing throughout the year, and they are they're talking about their work a lot. So you can follow us on Twitter. Our handle is there. Also, we blog a lot, as Leah mentioned earlier. So check out our Medium site. And if you're not into either of those, you can join our mailing list just through our website at codefor.ca. And that's it. And so the next slide, again, that's my contact information. It's Dorothy at codefor.ca. Thank you. I think that wraps up the presentation.
And I can see that there were some audio problems. A few people had some audio problems during the presentation. So we will be posting this as well as a record. So if something went wrong and you couldn't hear us at any point, you can check it out online afterwards as well. But for the time being, if anybody has any questions they'd like us to answer live, you can add them to the live chat in YouTube. But you can also, of course, if you have a question that needs some bouncing around in your head first, you can always reach out to us after as well. But we'll keep an eye right now on the live chat. I don't see any questions right now. Mm-hmm. I'll hang tight for a few seconds if anyone's typing something. But it looks like not. So Dorothy's contact information is on the slide there, as is mine. So if anything comes up, here is a question. So Colleen is curious, how does Code for Canada work with civic tech companies? There are a few different ways that we interface with the tech sector. One is by building, is through recruitment for the fellowship itself. So we did some outreach with tech companies to let people know about this opportunity, and to ask people to encourage their employees to apply. And that's something that we know that some companies did. Some people told us that they were excited to have their staff have the opportunity to be a fellow. So that's one way that we've worked with civic tech companies. But the other, and this is sort of a building program area for us, is through that kind of civic tech community network that I talked about at the beginning. So it wasn't with the focus of what this presentation was about, but we do have someone, Megan Halstern, who is focused on building that civic tech ecosystem across Canada, aside from the fellowship. And so part of that is working with community groups across Canada to help build the platform for new civic tech startups to start in. So in the States, where this ecosystem is a little bit older, we know that platform can be an important jumping off place for civic tech companies to get started. And so if that's more the motivation for you asking that question, I encourage you to keep an eye on that community network, and to to check out Civic Tech Toronto and some of the other community groups across Canada. I don't know, Dorothy, if you have anything to add there.
Yeah, I mean, there's, I think this is a great question. We, at Code for Canada, we love and strongly support civic tech companies, as well as the growing, civic tech industry in terms of like from a private sector side, and try to support in any way we can. Today's webinar or online open house was specifically about our fellowship program, and so that is more of a program that is a funnel for tech talent to work on government projects, and so that's one way that we help governments to go through digital transformation. But the other aspect is that we are slowly building out programming to help civic tech companies, and specifically Canadian ones. It's still fairly early stages, so I can't name drop anything right now. But Colleen, I would be interested in talking to you if you are interested in speaking further about how Code for Canada specifically works with civic tech companies, and how we're planning on rolling this out further in 2018. So I can't say anything tangible yet, but we do have a couple programs that are very early stages, and if you're interested in speaking about them, drop me a line and I'm happy to talk to you. Okay, we have another question from Ian Graham. Question around cost and funding. How much of the cost is to the client, government, versus how much of the cost is covered by Code for Canada? That breakdown will be helpful, as it's the first question from the government client. Yeah, that's a great question. So the cost that I had shown earlier, the $450,000, that's the program fee that is charged to government to cover the entire 10-month program for the fellowship. And so you saw the breakdown of that fee, where our government clients pay that fee to Code for Canada, and then Code for Canada is the employer of the fellows, and so we pay the salary of the fellows using the funds from that fee. We understand, in our pilot year, which we've just started out, this is the funding model that we've gone with for our first year, because it's based on some learnings that we've had from other Code 4s around the world, and also a bit of when we were launching the program, talking to our first government partners within Ontario and at the federal level, what seemed like a program fee that would be reasonable. But we understand that that fee might not be reasonable for all levels of government. Certainly at the municipal level, we've spoken to many public servants at all levels of government across Canada, and certainly at the municipal level, its budgets are more constrained, and it's harder to be able to cover a fee this large. That being said, we're happy to look to, well, first of all, we're really interested in supporting municipalities for sure with the fellowship program, because we love the work that municipalities do, and fellows themselves also would love to work with municipal governments. But in order to make that feasible from a funding perspective, we're happy to explore different models of funding, whether it's modifying the fellowship program in length or a number of fellows, whether it's looking at the way we partner with government partners at the municipal level. Perhaps instead of partnering with one jurisdiction, perhaps it's multiple jurisdictions in close vicinity who have a common problem that the fellows could work on a solution that could be adopted by several jurisdictions. So, for 2017, we went with one model, but we're happy to kind of figure out what the next iterations of our fellowship funding looks like. And so, Ian, yeah, if you have some feedback here, or again would like to chat more about this, feel free to drop me a line, and I'm really happy to kind of take this conversation forward. Okay, and so Mohammed has a question. Is there any scholarship available? Do you provide similar projects in the summer, shorter time? This is a good segue.
Yeah, so just to be clear, there's no, it sounds like this might be from the perspective of the fellows. And to be clear, fellows are full-time paid employees, so there's no cost by any means to the fellows. They're full-time employees. Do we provide similar projects in the summer for shorter time? If you're asking this from a perspective of like, it sounds like maybe from the perspective of students, there are opportunities to do civic tech work on smaller scales and over shorter periods of time. And those are more from our civic tech community network area. So the fellowship program right now is 10 months, and that's what we'll be doing for the next fellowship as well. But we are working to put together some smaller, we're looking at the opportunity of putting together some smaller projects that might not be on a fellowship model, but would still be aiming to meet some smaller scale needs from governments and meet those, the interests of people who might be looking for something shorter term to work on too. So I guess the short answer to that is stay tuned, because there might be opportunities coming in the future, but right now for the fellowship, it's the model is for 10 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and yeah, like as Leah mentioned, like the our civic tech community network is largely on the surface, and for the most part is people working on civic tech projects on a voluntary basis. We do have, however, other events that Code for Canada runs through our civic tech community that aren't just on a voluntary basis. So some great examples are Code for Canada worked with this Civic Tech Toronto group based in Toronto, and so we worked with them as well as with ESDC and the Government of Canada to design a youth employment challenge. So essentially it was a 6-week challenge presented to the civic tech community. There was a financial incentive or a prize at the end for any teams that made it through the challenge. But essentially, the challenge, the question that was asked was, how do we address youth unemployment in Canada? And teams could self-organize within Civic Tech Toronto and work on this challenge. And kind of the only requirements, or the requirements that we placed to the community were that in order for you to make it through to the end of the 6 weeks and be judged by ESDC in the end was you had to go through an entire human-centered design process from end to end. So that's like starting with users and collecting user research through interviews, creating a prototype, testing that prototype on users, and then getting feedback. Which I believe those were the kind of 3 milestones. Yeah. If you met those 3 milestones, as a team, you would have been able to be eligible for like the prize incentive at the end. And so what happened was, ESDC actually when they went into this, I think they were expecting like 1 or 2 prototypes or ideas, and they had 6 in the end. And these are like 6 like vetted prototypes with users. So it was like highly valuable for our government partner in this hackathon. So yeah, and then the participants loved it because they got a prize. They also learned a lot out of that. So Mohammed, aside from the kind of voluntary stuff, we do have a lot of, like Leah said, like stuff coming down the pipe in the new year with civic hackathons or design challenges that may be local to you that are also that could have some financial compensation. So do keep track of what's in our mailing list and our Twitter, because we do talk about those a lot. So
then the last question that I see is from Colleen, asking about I think sort of returning to a question about the support for civic tech companies, and specifically about civic tech companies trying to scale, having received some funding after prototyping.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, and so I think further to what I was saying earlier, that we do, at Code for Canada, we do have a couple programs coming down the pipe that would support civic tech communities, because we do want this as an industry to grow in Canada. And perhaps probably the most effective use of our time, Colleen, is just we could have a call and I'd love to hear about like what more about this, because I assume that you're from a civic tech company, and so I love talking to civic tech companies.
So get in touch with us, Colleen, and we'll talk in more detail about what you've got on the go. But it sounds like it's great, and congrats are in order. It sounds like. But yeah, let's talk more. So I think we're just about out of time, and maybe I'll toss it over to Luke to close things out. But for us, thank you for joining us. Please don't hesitate to get in touch. And we look forward to continuing to hear from you and talk with you. But that's all from Leah and Dorothy, and I'm going to toss it to Luke.
Great. So that brings us to the close of this online open house. I want to say thank you on behalf of the entire Code for Canada team for coming out today and your interest in the fellowship and our organization. As Dorothy and Leah said, feel free to reach out to them or any of us if you have any questions about Code for Canada at all. We're happy to talk to the community. And we'll see you at our next open house. So thanks again for coming. We apologize for some of the audio issues that happened, but we'll be posting this video up on our YouTube channel shortly so you can revisit it then. Thanks again and have a wonderful Wednesday.